There are a lot of things that can be said about former big leaguer Ryan Braun. A player who spent all 14 years of his career with the Milwaukee Brewers from 2007 to 2020, he's not only one of the greatest Brewers in franchise history, he's one of the greatest hitters of his generation. A Rookie of the Year award, an MVP, several All-Star Game selections and Silver Slugger awards, Braun's resume is nothing short of spectacular. Of course, if you know a thing or two, you'll know about the dark side of his career, his suspension from the league due to his ties with PEDs, and the reverse suspension he warranted, which led to a myriad of other questionable and downright unethical moments. This video has nothing to do with his career in full or the several controversies he was involved in, as there's already a video on YouTube that covers all of that. Instead, this video is about a specific season Braun had during his time in Major League Baseball. A season which might be perhaps the most overrated season a player has ever had. The season in question was his rookie year in 2007. A highly touted prospect, Braun made his Major League debut on May 25th of that year and made an immediate impact. Despite playing only in 113 games and having under 500 plate appearances, Braun had an incredible season. He slashed .324 with a .370 on base and .634 slugging for 1.004 OPS and 154 adjusted OPS. He hit 34 home runs, 66 extra base hits, drove in 97 RBIs, scored 91 runs, and stole 15 bases. It was an amazing year, but it gets even crazier when you think that all came while only playing in 70% of a full season. If we average those stats for a full 162 game season, Braun would have hit 49 home runs, had 94 extra base hits, drove in 139 RBIs, scored 130 runs, and stole 21 bases. Had he put up those stats across a full season, it would be hard to argue against him for MVP. He did receive a couple low-tier MVP votes, presumably due to his lack of playing time, but he did come away with the Rookie of the Year award, just barely eclipsing the second-place finisher, Troy Tulowitzki. So the question remains, if Braun had an incredible season, one that would have been a favorite to win MVP had he had more playing time, why do I believe it might be the most overrated season of all time? Well, there is one statistic I didn't mention yet, and that's WAR. What was Ryan Braun's WAR in 2007? 2. One of the greatest offensive seasons any player had that year, and Braun came away with a WAR of only 2. That is stunningly low. I honestly didn't believe that was accurate when I first saw it. A player having a season that great to also have a WAR mark that low never happens and is an anomaly. To see just how much of an anomaly Ryan Braun's 2007 season was, let's compare it to other seasons all time. Firstly, how did Braun compare to other players in 2007? That year, there were 167 players to have as many or more plate appearances to that of Ryan Braun. Of those 167, Braun ranks 8th in both OPS and adjusted OPS. He also ranks inside the top 10 in home runs, top 40 in RBIs and extra base hits, and top 50 in runs. Those last few rankings might seem lackluster, but then again, Braun only played in 70% of a full season. Despite being a top 10 hitter in Major League Baseball, Braun ranks 131st among all players that year in WAR. To compare him to another player from that year, outfielder Milton Bradley had the exact same adjusted OPS in fewer than half the plate appearances Braun did, and yet earned more WAR. Theoretically, the same elite level offensively in half the playing time, but more valuable. That was all in 2007. What about comparing Braun to players all time? Through 2023, there have been exactly 450 instances of a player having an OPS of at least 1,000, with a minimum 400 plate appearances in a single season. Of those 450, Braun is last in WAR. No player has been that elite with the bat to be that invaluable. Interestingly enough, Braun's teammate that season, Prince Fielder, ranks 10th. The difference between Braun at lowest and Prince Fielder at 10th lowest is roughly the same as Fielder at 10th and Mark McGwire at 60th. He's not only in last, he's in last by a significant margin. OPS can be skewed though due to what the league average is. What about looking at adjusted OPS? Still looking at players with a minimum 400 plate appearances, there have now been exactly 990 players in MLB history with an adjusted OPS of at least 154. Of that group of nearly 1,000, Braun once again ranks dead last. There has never been, and probably never will be, a player to be that great to also have such a low WAR. If Braun's season was historically amazing offensively, why is his WAR so low? Two reasons. One minor reason and one major reason. The minor reason is his lack of playing time. Give Braun more plate appearances and the same stats, and his WAR will rise. For example, 2 seasons later in 2009, Braun had 708 plate appearances. If we skew Braun's 2007 WAR across 708 plate appearances, it's now 2.9. Still incredibly low, but more comparable to other players at the bottom of the leaderboard. Secondly, and most importantly, Braun's WAR is low due to his defense. Ryan Braun played nearly 1,700 games during his long career, and over 1,500 of them came in the outfield, with 1,200 specifically in left field. However, the one season Braun played in where he wasn't an outfielder was his rookie year. Rather than playing in left field, Braun in 2007 played all 113 games at third base. To make a long story short, Braun was a really bad defender at third base, and being a bad defender at a premium position will greatly lower value. Just how bad was Braun defensively at third base? Using traditional stats, he committed 26 errors, and if that sounds like a lot, that's because it is. His 26 errors were tied for the most among all players in the league that season. Furthermore, he played 945 innings that year in the field and had an .895 fielding percentage. In the live ball era of Major League Baseball, that fielding percentage is the second lowest among all players to play at least 900 innings in the field at any position. Looking at advanced statistics, Braun earned negative 2.9 DWAR, and looking at all players all time, that DWAR is the 30th lowest in a single season. Not only is it in the bottom 30 throughout MLB history, it's the lowest ever among third basemen. Hopefully all of that information tells you just how terrible he was at third base. Braun never played another game at third following his rookie season, and for good reason. I'm genuinely surprised Milwaukee stuck with him there all season, as it was obvious they took one good look at him and knew he was no third baseman. Which I find odd because Braun was drafted as a third baseman and played exclusively there in the minor leagues. Didn't anyone realize he probably shouldn't have been there? Anyway, this is where I want to argue something. I believe this season is an exception for judging a player's season on WAR. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike WAR and I think it's useful, but how could an offensive juggernaut like Braun only be worth that little? People will say the worst defensive season ever by a third baseman will offset that, but by that much? For those unaware, a WAR of 2 is roughly the average, not 0. To quote Fangraphs, an average full-time position player is worth about 2 WAR, while average bench players contribute 0 to 1 WAR. So you're telling me someone who had an OPS over 1,000 in a near qualified season is only an average player? To compare Braun to another player from 2007, Toronto Blue Jays shortstop John McDonald came to the plate 353 times. He slashed .251 with a .279 on base and .333 slugging for 612 OPS and 61 adjusted OPS. He also played about 900 innings in the field, almost exclusively at shortstop. Despite far fewer plate appearances, with an adjusted OPS 2.5 times lower than Braun's, McDonald had 2.4 WAR in 2007. Was John McDonald really a better player than Ryan Braun? Perhaps I'm in the wrong here, but it doesn't seem right that someone who hit 34 home runs and nearly 300 total bases in under 500 plate appearances is only considered average. Ryan Braun in 2007 had one of the best offensive seasons of any player that year, and yet was one of the least valuable. It's perhaps the most overrated season anyone has ever had.